Have you ever stopped to wonder what kind of secrets might be hiding inside the weapons carried by the people who fought in this country's most brutal wars? Now, imagine this. One of the deadliest snipers in modern American history wasn't just a legend on the battlefield. She was an indigenous woman whose rifle held something so disturbing the military spent years trying to bury it. Before we jump deep into this classified story that's only recently seen the light of day, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. And if you're into uncovering the chapters of American history that were never meant to be told, hit that subscribe button. These stories don't survive without you. Our story starts in the winter of 2003, during the early days of Operation Iraqi Freedom. A small team of military historians had been assigned a routine task: catalog old weapons from the conflict and preserve them for the archives. Sounds simple until it wasn't, because hidden inside one of those weapons was a mystery that would shake the entire team. "The rifle came to us like any other," said Dr. Marcus Holloway, the lead historian. "Just another item to catalog. We had no idea what we were about to uncover." The weapon was a modified M24 sniper rifle used by Staff Sergeant Ayanna Redfeather, a 32-year-old sharpshooter from the Northern Cheyenne Reservation in Montana. Redfeather wasn't just good, she was feared. With 217 confirmed kills, she became a ghost on the battlefield. Her commanding officer, Colonel James Westbrook, put it simply: the enemy called her Whispering Death. They never heard the shot that took their men down. Some locals in Iraq even believed she wasn't human at all, but a spirit sent to punish them. Her story could have ended there, a tale of extraordinary skill, if not for what Dr. Holloway's team found when they began taking apart her rifle. "We started with the custom cheek rest," explained weapons specialist Sophia Chen. "That's when we saw the first weird thing. Hidden inside was a small compartment containing a cloth pouch filled with soil and dried herbs. Strange, sure, but not impossible. Soldiers carry personal items. Indigenous soldiers often carry pieces of home. But that was just the warm-up. As the team removed the barrel shroud, they found carvings etched directly into the metal, symbols and prayers written in Northern Cheyenne script. Not decorative, not random, intentional. And still, that wasn't the real shock. Inside a concealed compartment carved into the modified stock was a tiny leather-bound journal. The pages were old, fragile, and filled with handwriting from different time periods. Each generation of women in Redfeather's family had added to it. The oldest entries came from a woman named Morningstar, a survivor of the 1864 Sand Creek Massacre, where over 200 Cheyenne and Arapaho people, mostly women and children, were slaughtered by militias. But it wasn't the historical accounts that unsettled the researchers. It was the ritual. Morningstar described something she called the binding ritual, a ceremony meant to trap the spirits of those who had harmed her people. According to the journal, these spirits could be bound to objects and passed down through generations. Dr. Eliza Running Bear, a cultural anthropologist brought in to interpret the text, explained it this way: Morningstar believed she could bind the spirits of their oppressors, and that these spirits could guide future generations. The journal claims they could even guide bullets. A ritual, a lineage, and a rifle that had seen impossible accuracy. And this was only the beginning. According to the journal, every woman in Redfeather's bloodline added her own bound spirits to the lineage, building what the text called a legion of the wronged. Dr. Running Bear was careful to stress the academic perspective. We're dealing with cultural tradition, not literal supernatural forces. But even she couldn't ignore the strange coincidence between those beliefs and Sergeant Redfeather's almost impossible accuracy. She made shots other experts said shouldn't have been possible. Once the rifle's hidden contents were uncovered, the military reacted fast. Too fast. The weapon and the journal were instantly classified and pulled from the normal cataloging process. A specialized DIA team swept in, boxed everything up, and forced everyone involved to sign new NDAs.
"They shut us down overnight," Dr. Holloway said. "We were just doing routine work. Then suddenly armed officers were confiscating notes and telling us the project no longer existed. It felt like we'd walked into a conspiracy thriller." For nearly 15 years, nothing about Ayanna Redfeather's rifle saw daylight. It probably would have stayed buried if not for journalist Thomas Blackwood, who filed a FOIA request in 2017 while digging into a completely different topic. "I was researching war artifacts," he said. "Then I found a vague reference to a culturally significant weapon system with potential psychological warfare applications. Phrases like that are red flags. I had to know more." His request forced the military to release heavily redacted documents, but even those fragments were enough to confirm the existence of the rifle, the journal, and the bizarre history tied to them. Digging deeper, Blackwood learned that Ayanna Redfeather returned to the Northern Cheyenne Reservation after her discharge in 2005. People there say she became withdrawn, barely speaking to anyone outside her family. Then, in 2008, she disappeared. The official story is she moved away, said tribal elder Robert Yellowhawk, but there's no record of where she went, no address, no paper trail, nothing, and her family doesn't talk about it. Rumors spread instead. Some say she believed federal agents were following her, trying to learn what she knew about the ritual and the rifle's power. Others claim she went into hiding to protect the knowledge her family had safeguarded for more than a century. But things get stranger when you look at the people who handled the rifle. Dr. Holloway resigned just 6 months after the discovery and vanished into quiet life in rural Vermont. When he finally agreed to a brief interview, he admitted the experience never left him. "I keep having these dreams," he said quietly. "I'm running across open plains, Wyoming or Montana, I think. Something is chasing me. I can't see it, but I know it's angry." Sophia Chen, the weapons expert, didn't just have bad dreams. 3 months after the discovery, she crashed her car on a straight stretch of highway near Baltimore. Clear sky, no mechanical issues, no explanation. She survived with major injuries that ended her career. "Sometimes I swear someone else was in the car," she said from her home in Arizona. "I reached for something on the passenger seat, and it felt like another hand touched mine, cold. The next thing I remember, the car was flipping." Out of the 7 researchers who examined the rifle, 5 left government or military service within a year, and at least 3 of them reported persistent nightmares, sleep paralysis, or disturbing visions.
2 members of the research team disappeared so completely that former colleagues said they left no forwarding addresses, not even a goodbye email. When we reached out to the Department of Defense for comment, the response was predictable and flat. They do not comment on rumors regarding classified projects and reminded us that culturally significant artifacts are handled with appropriate respect. That rehearsed denial only poured fuel on the theories. People pointed out that the U.S. military has a long, documented history of poking around the supernatural, from remote viewing to psychic espionage programs like the Stargate Project, which ran for 2 decades. So when historian Dr. Richard Thornton weighed in, he didn't mince words. If the military thought Red Feather had even a small edge, psychological, cultural, or something they can't explain, they'd want to study it. Then came the bombshell. In 2015, a declassified document surfaced referencing something called Operation Longshot, an investigation into cultural and spiritual practices believed to enhance targeting ability. One section specifically highlighted Indigenous traditions as an area of interest. Meanwhile, on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, Ayanna Redfeather's name has become legend. Young women talk about her with a kind of reverent awe. Some say they still practice shooting techniques she passed down, techniques tied as much to ancestral connection as to physical skill. "She showed us that our traditions have power," said Kiana Wolfname, who teaches youth on the reservation. "She proved our ancestors' ways aren't just history, they're still alive." But what else was hidden inside Red Feather's rifle? Beyond the journal and the pouch of earth, the most cryptic items remain locked behind classified walls. One anonymous source, who claims to have been present during a secondary examination, described items that sounded impossible.
a small vial of liquid that never settled. No matter how you shook it or turned it, it flowed like it was alive. And a piece of metal, copper or brass, etched with symbols no expert could identify. When placed near a compass, it sent the needle spinning non-stop. None of this can be verified, but disturbingly, the claims mirror entries in the family journal. One passage, written by Ayana's grandmother, talks about a metal that speaks and grows warm when danger is near, and water that remembers, said to show visions of distant enemies. Old stories or instructions? As the investigation deepened, government interest turned toward Ayana's surviving family. Her younger sister, Michelle Redfeather, says she was approached multiple times by men claiming to be from different federal agencies. They kept asking about our traditions, if Ayana taught me anything about shooting, if we practiced connecting with ancestors. It felt like they weren't looking for her, they were hunting for whatever she carried. Michelle insisted she didn't know where her sister went and had no special knowledge. Eventually, she filed a restraining order. The visit stopped, but unmarked vehicles still appeared near her home for years. And it didn't end with the family. Between 2005 and 2010, the Department of Defense quietly funded a study of Cheyenne spiritual practices, specifically warrior rituals, hunting ceremonies, and traditions tied to combat. Dr. Sarah White, who briefly worked on the project, quit in protest. It wasn't cultural preservation, it was extraction. They wanted techniques they thought could give soldiers an edge. When I challenged the ethics, they pushed me out. The story took another wild turn in 2011 when a Marine Scout sniper deployed in Afghanistan was caught carrying a small leather pouch almost identical to the one hidden inside Ayana Redfeather's rifle. The Marine, Staff Sergeant David Lone Eagle, was also Northern Cheyenne and had once trained alongside Redfeather. Lone Eagle had racked up 87 confirmed kills, many in conditions most snipers would consider impossible. But when investigators confronted him about the pouch, he brushed it off as a simple good luck charm from his grandmother. The military didn't buy it. He was yanked off the front lines overnight and sent to a facility in Virginia for what officials called specialized debriefing.
He resurfaced 3 months later, but not as the same man. Instead of returning to combat, he was quietly reassigned to a training role. Marines who'd known him before said his whole energy changed, his swagger was gone, and he refused to even touch a sniper rifle during demonstrations. His eyes weren't the same, one Marine told us. It was like he couldn't see the world the way he used to, like whatever they did to him in Virginia took something out of him. Attempts to contact Lone Eagle today went nowhere. He left the military, vanished into the forests of the Pacific Northwest, and his family made it clear he wants to be left alone. The deeper we dug, the more unsettling the pattern became. Over the past 15 years, at least 7 Indigenous sharpshooters representing multiple tribes were recruited into elite military units, delivered near-perfect performance, and then either disappeared from public records or were shuffled into strange, abrupt career changes. Every single one had strong ties to traditional cultural practices, and every single one had an uncanny level of precision. "That's not random," said activist James Runningdeer, who monitors Indigenous recruitment. "They're hunting for specific traits, people with ties to warrior societies, old traditions, ceremonies outsiders don't understand." Runningdeer backed up his claim with internal documents showing recruiters were instructed to target Native candidates with strong cultural roots. Many of these recruits were fast-tracked straight into long-range reconnaissance programs. But the most chilling accounts didn't come from researchers or activists. They came from the battlefield. One former Iraqi insurgent, speaking anonymously, described an encounter that still terrifies him. His unit had set up a perfect ambush, hidden positions, clean lines of fire, zero visibility from the road. Then, out of nowhere, their spotter collapsed, shot cleanly through the skull. No crack of a rifle, no echo, nothing. Then 2 more men fell. "We could not understand," he said. "There was no sound, no flash, nothing to tell us where death was coming from." Fear spread like wildfire.
Some fighters swore they saw a moving shadow, thin, shifting, like smoke instead of flesh. Others claimed to hear whispers in an unfamiliar language right before a man was taken down. The entire unit abandoned the area and refused to return. Similar stories surfaced in Afghanistan. Taliban fighters carried protective amulets. Some refused to step outside if certain birds circled overhead. Others spoke of ghost bullets that hunted specific men by name. Normally, these stories would be chalked up to war zone superstition, but according to military psychologists, the details were too consistent and too precise across different groups, regions, and years. "There's something primal about a long-range kill you never hear coming," said Dr. Nathan Blackwood, a specialist in psychological warfare. "When death hits without warning, the mind creates monsters." What surprised even Blackwood wasn't that the myths existed, but that American special operations units quietly encouraged them. Declassified documents show psychological operations teams intentionally spread rumors of supernatural snipers in order to crush enemy morale. And the name that came up again and again, whispered, feared, half-believed? Ayanna Redfeather. What we still couldn't pin down was whether the military was simply weaponizing fear or whether they had stumbled onto something real, something they didn't know how to control. Then everything changed. Out of nowhere, we received a message on our encrypted tip line. The sender claimed to be Ayanna Redfeather herself. The note included specific details about the rifle that had never been released, not even in the redacted files. "What they found was only what I allowed them to find," the message read. "The rifle was not the source, it was a doorway. The ancestors do not reveal themselves to those who exploit. What the military wants can't be forced. Even if they hold it, they'll never understand it." We tried to verify the sender. No luck. Cybersecurity specialists traced it through layers of anonymous routing. Too many to follow. After that, silence. 2 weeks later, someone broke into our office. Nothing was stolen, nothing damaged, but every file related to the Red Feather investigation had been pulled from drawers, flipped through, and left slightly out of place, as if someone wanted us to know they'd been there. Police shrugged it off as a random burglary. We knew better. 3 days after the break-in, a small package arrived. No return address. Inside was a single modified rifle cartridge. Instead of gunpowder, the casing held a tiny carved wooden vessel filled with a pinch of earth, the same earth described inside Ayanna's rifle. A handwritten note read, "Some secrets belong to the land. Let this one rest." Security consultants we spoke to didn't mince words. "When you get a message like that," a former intelligence officer told us, "it's not advice, it's a warning." But we weren't done. Quietly, through private channels, we reached out to former soldiers who'd served beside Ayanna. One of them, former Marine Sergeant Marcus Hayes, shared a story he'd never told publicly. "We were pinned down outside Fallujah," he said. "Ayanna got this look like she was listening to something none of us could hear. She started whispering, something old, not English. Then she took 7 shots in less than 2 minutes. 7 rounds, 7 confirmed kills. All headshots, all through smoke, dust, and near blackout visibility." "That wasn't the weirdest part," Hayes added. "Afterward, she walked to every single body and knelt beside them. I thought she was verifying, but her lips were moving. She was saying something. When I asked her about it, she just said, 'completing the circle.'" Other soldiers shared similar stories. She burned herbs in her room before missions. She whispered to her rifle before cleaning it. She left small offerings, food, tobacco, tucked into corners of bases, like she was protecting the ground itself. At first, we thought it was just cultural stuff. Former Army Specialist Thomas Rodriguez said, "Everyone's got their quirks on deployment. Lucky charms, weird superstitions. Hers just seemed deeper." But then Rodriguez described a moment he still couldn't explain. Outside Mosul, their forward scout reported an enemy sniper nearly 800 meters away, hidden in a bell tower. Visibility was terrible. Ayana didn't even raise her scope. She just stared at the tower for half a minute, inhaled once, and fired a single round. The scout confirmed the kill immediately. She couldn't have seen him, Rodriguez said. No one could have. But she did. And every soldier we talked to said the same thing. Ayana wasn't just a talented sniper. She was tapping into something older than the war, older than the rifle, older than any training the military could ever offer. Something she never wanted them to have. When we reached the tower, the enemy sniper was on the ground with a single clean shot through his right eye. Ayana just shrugged and said the wind told her where to aim. That moment nudged our investigation toward a deeper, stranger network, one that eventually led us to a classified research initiative known as Project Longbow.
Project Longbow was formed in 2002, right before the Iraq War kicked off. Officially, it was described as a program exploring non-standard targeting methodologies. Unofficially, it was an attempt to figure out why a tiny subset of soldiers, scouts, snipers, pathfinders, seemed to tap into something beyond physics and training. Dr. Eleanor Gray, a former DARPA consultant who had brushed up against the project, laid it out for us. After 9/11, the pressure to find any tactical advantage was overwhelming, so researchers started looking into what they called anomalous cognition, cases where elite soldiers sensed danger before it appeared or made impossible shots without calculating wind, distance, or terrain. But Red Feather wasn't like the others. According to Dr. Gray, most subjects had no idea how they were doing what they were doing. It was instinct, almost unconscious. Ayana, on the other hand, had her own explanation. She said it came from a lineage, a tradition, a knowledge system passed down quietly through generations. And that is exactly what grabbed the attention of Project Longbow's inner circle. Internal memos we uncovered referenced phrases like replicable indigenous methodologies and transferable ancestral knowledge systems. Stripped of the jargon, the goal was simple: figure out if Ayana's abilities could be standardized, taught, scaled, militarized. In 2004, during some of the heaviest fighting in Iraq, a secret training facility was established in Nevada. Personnel files showed that 16 snipers of indigenous heritage were moved there for something labeled Advanced Cultural Integration Training. One of them, retired Staff Sergeant James Blackwolf, agreed to speak with us. He laughed when he explained the official reason: cultural stress management research. Once they arrived, the truth became obvious. The researchers were dissecting traditions they barely understood. Blackwolf described a program that merged intense sniper drills with hand-picked rituals cobbled together from different tribes. Anthropologists, psychologists, and even a few tribal elders had been brought in, though Blackwolf questioned whether all of them were there willingly. Before every shooting session, they were instructed to perform stripped-down versions of ceremonies that were meant to be private, sacred, protected. The monitoring was relentless. Brain scans during live fire, DNA sampling, sleep tracking, notes on everything: breathing, mood, reaction time. It felt less like training and more like a lab experiment on human intuition. What unsettled Blackwolf most was the knowledge the researchers had, knowledge they shouldn't have had. They questioned him about a coming-of-age ritual in his tribe involving communion with ancestral warrior spirits. That ritual isn't documented anywhere. It's shared orally within the community, never with outsiders. When he pressed them on how they knew about it, a researcher smiled and said, "We have our sources." Eventually, he realized those sources might have been soldiers like Ayana, people who trusted the military with traditions that were never meant to be dissected under fluorescent lights. Blackwolf made it 3 months before he demanded reassignment. Out of the 16 soldiers brought into Project Longbow's orbit, only 7 completed the full 6-month cycle. The rest left early, citing emergencies or sudden health issues. Off record, many admitted the same thing. The program wasn't just invasive, it was violating. "They didn't get it," Blackwolf told us quietly. "These aren't tricks or skills you can extract like a muscle memory. They're part of a relationship.
with the land, with the ancestors, with something bigger than any of us, and you can't weaponize a relationship like that without breaking it. They tried to turn something sacred into a weapon. That's not how any of this works. That was how one former participant summed up Project Longbow's fatal flaw. And maybe that's why, in 2006, the program was quietly shut down, its final assessment labeled simply inconclusive. Still, bits and pieces of its findings allegedly slipped into the training pipelines of certain elite units, buried under layers of classification.
As for Ayanna Redfeather's rifle, several sources confirmed it was moved to a secure research wing at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. That's where it reportedly sat, not collecting dust, but being dissected. One whistleblower who worked inside that facility told us researchers were obsessed with odd metallurgical anomalies in the weapon. The barrel, they said, had been treated with some kind of compound that altered its behavior. Lab tests picked up traces of rare earth elements that a standard soldier wouldn't have access to, and that aren't used in typical weapons manufacturing. But the strangest part wasn't what the rifle was made of, it was how it behaved. When range technicians fired it, the weapon performed exactly as expected, precise but not supernatural. But when they handed it to certain test subjects, particularly those with Indigenous heritage, the accuracy jumped significantly. Not random luck, not statistical noise, real, measurable improvement. We had no model that made sense of it, the whistleblower said. Some folks started throwing around fringe theories, bioelectric fields, consciousness interaction, even quantum entanglement. Others tried to force it into biomechanics. None of it explained what the data kept telling us. By 2010, the official investigation was declared closed, and the rifle was allegedly transferred to a military museum's secured storage. But 3 independent defense sources told us that specific pieces, the engraved barrel, the modified stock with the hidden compartments, never left government custody. They're still being studied behind locked doors. Meanwhile, Ayanna's legend only grew. In sniper schools and special operations circles, especially among Indigenous soldiers, her name became something whispered rather than spoken. Trainees shared stories of seeing her on distant ridgelines during field exercises, or feeling someone guiding their breathing during a near impossible shot. No official instructor acknowledged it, but plenty of them didn't dismiss it either. Master Sergeant Robert Two Hawks, a veteran instructor at Fort Benning, put it carefully. Look, we don't teach superstition, but I've had students swear they heard her voice during wind calls. And between you and me, sometimes I think they're not imagining it. Two Hawks admitted that he incorporates Indigenous philosophies into his marksmanship training, not the rituals Project Longbow tried to harvest, but the worldview behind them. A great shot isn't just physics, he said. It's alignment. Shooter, weapon, environment, all synced. Some call it flow state. My people have older words for it, but the experience is the same. This approach, respecting the whole system instead of ripping out pieces, stands in stark contrast to Project Longbow's misguided extraction efforts. But then comes the big question: where is Ayanna Redfeather? Despite sightings, rumors, and that encrypted message sent to us early on, her official trail ends in 2005. Military records show an honorable discharge and multiple commendations, including a Silver Star. Her last documented residence was on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, but tribal officials say she hasn't lived there in more than 15 years. And then, in 2018, everything shifted. A wildlife photographer, hiking deep in the Absaraka Range of Montana, captured a single image, one that sent shockwaves through the quiet network of soldiers who still speak her name. The trail camera photo was taken at dawn, a lone silhouette drifting through the tree line, almost swallowed by the morning haze. The figure's face was impossible to make out, but the ceremonial braids, the posture, and the rifle case across her back, it matched everything we knew about Ayanna Redfeather. When the photographer hiked out to retrieve his camera, he found it unmounted and neatly placed on a nearby boulder. No damage, no footprints,
All memory cards wiped clean except for that single image. It felt intentional, he told us, like she wanted to be seen, but only on her own terms. And that idea, visibility on her terms, has haunted every step of this investigation.
From the curated pages in the hidden journal to the deliberately placed artifacts inside the rifle, nothing about Redfeather's trail seems accidental. It's as if she decided exactly what outsiders were allowed to uncover and concealed the rest behind layers they were never meant to peel back. In our traditions, the most powerful knowledge is never handed over freely, said Ella Runningwater, an elder of the Northern Cheyenne Nation, careful not to speak about Ayanna directly. Wisdom reveals itself only to those who are prepared. What looks like the whole truth to some is often just the surface. This perspective reframes the entire military investigation. It suggests something the government never considered. Maybe the deepest parts of Redfeather's abilities, and the rifle that focused them, stayed hidden because she didn't permit anyone to find them. And then things got stranger. Over the years, members of our own team began experiencing unusual incidents. One researcher returned to her locked office after a weekend away to find a single brass cartridge centered on her desk, placed with almost ceremonial precision. Another woke from a vivid dream of endless plains and distant mountains, only to find a small pouch of earth on his windowsill in an apartment secured on the 14th floor. Most recently, the wildlife photographer who captured the trail camera image received a package with no return address. Inside was a beautifully carved wooden box containing a modified rifle scope covered in intricate symbols. A handwritten note sat beneath it. Some things are seen more clearly when you stop trying to look directly at them. When he tested the scope, the effect was nothing short of surreal. It didn't magnify anything. Instead, it revealed what was already there, but hidden. Movement patterns of animals far beyond normal perception, subsurface waterways veiled beneath dry ground, ancient footpaths buried under generations of overgrowth. "It doesn't show distance," he said quietly. "It shows truth." Which brings us back to the central question behind Ayanna Redfeather's mystery. What if the real power in her rifle was never the weapon, but the vision it granted? What if the military and its desperation to weaponize an advantage missed the deeper gift entirely? Deep inside the journal, concealed within the rifle, Morningstar, the 19th century ancestor who began the tradition, wrote, "The white man's weapons take life but understand nothing of it. Our ways remember that to take life honorably requires knowing its sacred nature. The spirits guide my aim not to make killing easier, but to ensure that when death must come, it comes with respect and purpose." This worldview directly contradicts modern military doctrine. While modern armies distance soldiers from killing through training, technology, psychology, the tradition described here demands the opposite: connection, awareness, responsibility. In many Indigenous warrior traditions, taking a life was never casual, explained Dr. Runningbear. There were rituals for preparing the spirit, acknowledging the life taken, and cleansing oneself afterwards. These weren't superstitions, they were profound systems for safeguarding mental and spiritual health in war. Modern military psychology has started catching on to what Indigenous warriors have known for generations. Research into combat veterans shows that moral injury, the deep trauma from actions that violate your core values, often leaves longer-lasting scars than fear-based trauma ever could. Traditional Indigenous practices, which combined spiritual preparation and cleansing with warfare, may have shielded warriors from these moral injuries long before psychology even had words for them. In that context, the real significance of what was in Redfeather's rifle wasn't a tactical advantage. She carried her ancestors with her, not as weapons, but as witnesses and guides. They held her to a higher standard, even in war.
And that's something the military could never grasp. They wanted the power without the responsibility. Yet recent developments suggest some within the military are beginning to see the wisdom in this approach. In 2021, the Army quietly integrated elements inspired by Indigenous healing traditions into its soldier reintegration programs. These programs now include modified talking circles, exercises connecting soldiers to the land, and ceremonies to help veterans process their combat experiences spiritually and communally. Officially, they are presented as a mix of cultural traditions and modern psychology, but insiders privately admit the influence of what was learned from Red Feather's story and similar practices. "We're not appropriating sacred practices," one developer explained. "We're recognizing that Indigenous cultures created sophisticated systems to help warriors return whole to their communities. That wisdom complements modern psychological methods." This represents a radical departure from the extractive, utilitarian mindset of Project Longbow. Instead of attempting to isolate a skill to weaponize it, these programs honor the holistic nature of Indigenous traditions and the healing they can offer all service members, regardless of heritage. Meanwhile, stories continue to emerge from the remote American West of a solitary woman, sometimes accompanied by a wolf or a large dog, roaming the wilderness where few dare to tread. Locals, especially from Indigenous communities, speak of encounters with a woman who offers guidance to lost hikers, intervenes in wilderness emergencies, and occasionally leaves small bundles of herbs or other natural offerings at sacred sites. "She found what she was looking for," Michelle Redfeather said when asked about her sister's ongoing absence. "Not what the military wanted her to find, but what our ancestors intended. She's continuing the tradition in her own way." Those closest to the story believe Ayanna Redfeather didn't vanish to hide or protect secrets. She withdrew to embody the tradition she inherited fully, a tradition that fosters a radically different relationship with the land, ancestral knowledge, and the immense responsibility of taking life in war. "In our stories," explained Elder Ella Runningwater, "the most powerful medicine people often live at the edges of the community. They walk between worlds, keeping connections to forces and beings most of us have forgotten. This isn't abandonment, it's a different kind of service." If this understanding is right, then the ultimate truth of Ayanna Redfeather's story isn't what was hidden in her rifle. It's what her life and choices reveal, a glimpse of a radically different way to understand humans, the natural world, and the moral weight of warfare. In a world where technology increasingly distances soldiers from the consequences of their actions, her tradition insists on connection, accountability, and respect. In a culture that often dismisses Indigenous knowledge as superstition or romanticized mysticism, Ayanna Redfeather's story demonstrates the profound psychological and spiritual wisdom embedded in these ancient practices. As our investigation concludes, we are left with more questions than answers. The full truth of what lay hidden in her rifle remains elusive, protected by classified designations and the deliberate silence of those who understand its significance.
But perhaps the most important lessons aren't in the objects themselves, but in the larger truths they point toward. As Morningstar wrote in the Hidden Journal, the true power is not in the tool, but in the hands that hold it, the eyes that guide it, and the spirit that directs it. The rifle is nothing without the wisdom to use it honorably. For those with eyes to see and ears to hear, her story continues to unfold across the vast landscapes of the American West. In remote spaces, far from the noise of civilization, you might hear an ancient language carried on the wind. You might glimpse a solitary figure moving like a shadow along distant ridgelines. In moments of greatest need, you might sense the subtle guidance of hands reaching across generations, offering wisdom and protection. And should you ever encounter a lone woman with ceremonial braids, knowing eyes, and a rifle marked with symbols from another time, heed her carefully. In a world dominated by technological warfare and remote killing, her tradition remembers the sacred responsibility of taking life and the healing that must follow. As our investigation closes, we recall the words from what is believed to be Redfeather's final communication. Some secrets belong to the land and its first people. Perhaps the greatest respect we can show is to honor the mysteries, acknowledge their boundaries, and recognize that some knowledge is not meant to be possessed, but approached with reverence. The lesson of her rifle is not in its physical contents, but in the reminder that some things in this world cannot be classified, quantified, or controlled. Powers respond not to force, but to respect. Traditions offer healing rather than destruction. Wisdom reveals itself only to those who approach with open hearts and honorable intentions. As the journal concluded, the path of the bullet is straight, but the journey of the spirit moves in cycles. What appears to be an ending may be merely the beginning of a deeper understanding. Listen for the voices of the ancestors. They speak still for those who remember how to hear them. And for those who have followed her story to the end, remember this. In a world dominated by division and destruction, there are still those who walk ancient paths of wisdom and healing. Sacred traditions continue to offer guidance, and guardians like Ayana Redfeather watch from the shadows, protecting knowledge our modern world is only beginning to honor. May God and Jesus Christ guide and protect us as we navigate these hidden truths and ancient paths. In times of greatest darkness, it is faith that lights the way and reminds us of our sacred responsibility